What's going on, guys? Back with another episode on the Winning Browns podcast. Yes, it has been a minute. We have been trying to record a few episodes. We'll get some of that to you as far as uploads and whatnot. But yeah, it has been a minute since we last recorded. But yep, boys, the Indian boys, we're back. The Indian boys that win more fans over than the Browns ever win Super Bowls. We're just that good, right? But yeah, it has been a tumultuous last 4 months as far as football. A lot of interesting storylines, news, drama has been going on. And once again, we are getting ready for yet another exciting NFL season ahead of us. And to start off, we're going to talk about training camp and some of the headlines that have been going on through there. And then from there, we're also going to be discussing the NFL 100 list. And then we got a fun surprise for you guys at the end of the episode. Something we've done in the past, and we're going to continue to do it, but hopefully we end up doing it in a more clean way than last time. But something that I know you guys definitely enjoyed last time. But let's get started. So as far as this year, when it comes to NFL training camps, two of the biggest headlines that have been going on, I think, are the Brandon Ayuk situation with my San Francisco 49ers and Aaron Rodgers with the New York Jets, because God knows how many times the New York Jets try to bring headlines into our podcast episode.
Disgusting. I mean, okay, so I guess we'll start off with Aaron Rodgers, Mr. No Man in Show, and then all of a sudden he becomes New York Joe whenever he just wants to. Aaron Rodgers is like, I'm sick of it at this point. I mean, I get the whole like, I'm gonna live in this dark room and enlighten myself somehow with the pinch of light that falls out of the faint sky. I get all that stuff, but at the same time, you gotta act a little reasonable. I mean, it is a team. It's trying to come back together after you played 4 damn snaps the whole time last year. Sat on the sideline looking like a New York deli sandwich, for God's sakes. No cheese, no ham, no nothing on it. Absolutely plain Jane. But at the same time, like, you got a bunch of young guys. And if I may see, I have to say one thing. When it comes to the New York Jets, I will say this. It's one of the very few times in my life where I've seen a great coaching staff, a good to great coaching staff, an incredible scouting department. Just one of the best general managers we've seen in a while. And we got a horrible attitude team. It's just one of those rarities that I see, because you have everything together except the play. It's just one of those reasons. Like, I mean, you look at what they've done this year. They bring in Mike Williams, and I will vouch saying that when this guy is healthy, he's one of the biggest threats that's out there in the NFL. And I would say he's one of the top 10 threats in the NFL when he's not injured. From a receiver standpoint, you got to put 2 on him to at least get him under 50 if he's not injured. That's how valuable of a piece this guy was, right? You also get Hassan Reddick, who, if we're being honest, just came back of probably the most dominant 2 years of his entire career, and probably one of the most dominant years as an edge rusher we've seen in the past 2 years, right? So he's a complete package when you get Hassan Reddick, you get Mike Williams, you already have Garrett Wilson, you have an offensive line that's building up, you have all the pieces, and then you got some of these guys who just want to go to the Bahamas on vacation when their vacation's done. Like, if you look at any sport, the NFL's got some of the largest summers we know of. I mean, if we're being honest, like, the NBA doesn't have that many that long of a summer. I can tell you cricket doesn't have summers, right? Like, the NFL has a long summer.
For sure.
And rugby for sure. You look at this one,
Rugby.
the NFL, it just, come on. Like, really? You want to take a vacation now? It's a little ridiculous to me. I get he's 41, but at the same time, like, come on. This team needs you, and you want to sell out like that. Doesn't float my boat.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the dot. I'm gonna expand a little further, and I'm gonna frankly go on a little bit of a rant here because I'm frankly sick of it. We've talked about the Jets. I think on our first 4 episodes alone, we talked about them on 7 different occasions. whether it was injuries, whether it was drama that was going on, whether it was Rodgers tearing his Achilles, everything that could have gone wrong happened to the Jets. They were constantly in the media throughout the whole year, and I'm getting sick of it. I get that they're the New York team, so everything over there is exaggerated, but at the same time, I mean, you're not. I mean, this has been a drama-laden 2 years that reminds me a lot of some other teams I've got to cover. I got to see. You know, we talk about the Raiders when they were with John Gruden, especially that final year. We talk about the Steelers, the final 2 years that Antonio Brown was there, where pretty much they went from a team that was constantly, criticizing each other through radio shows, interviews, whatnot. And then Mike Tomlin just could not steer a ship and somehow still managed to nearly get them in the playoffs. But this was a team that every week was just getting clowned on because of some ridiculous thing that would happen, right? You talk about the Niners in the final year with Jim Harbaugh, same deal. And with this team, it just feels like you said it, like they're one of the most talented teams in football. They're also a pretty
If
young
not the
team.
most.
I should
If not the most.
probably, yeah,
If not the most.
definitely. And to me, I'll put this here. I'm not going to say that they're as talented as the Legion of Boom Seahawks, but they're
Yeah.
certainly as flamboyant. They're certainly, in terms of where they stand relative to the rest of the NFL, they are head and shoulders above the NFL currently, compared like much like the Legion of Boom was at that time, as far as secondary, as far as defensive play, as far as just overall their style of play. It's very similar. So there are a lot of
Defense,
similarities in both those.
roster wise,
Roster wise, I mean, as far as just style and kind of like their, what's the word,
I
personality.
get. I guess their approach. If you, their
Yeah,
approach.
yeah, yeah. There you go,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I see. Fair.
And from that standpoint, I feel like those teams are very like emotionally invested in the project. And when you look at a team like the Seahawks, the minute that they didn't run the ball in that Super Bowl, they pretty much gave up on Pete Carroll and the coaching staff. And I'm seeing a similar thing happen with the New York Jets. There's a lot of things that have just been bad luck in the case of the Jets. Whether it's Brees Hall tearing his ACL or Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles, or Zach Wilson just being absolutely terrible and the media just capitalizing on that. There are those things. But when your team is constantly going out in the media and criticizing your coach, criticizing, going out there and putting just completely, what's the word, cryptic statements out there every damn week, it gets to a point where you start wondering, what the hell is the coaching staff doing? What the hell is upper management doing to handle these types of situations? Robert Saleh is a good coach as far as development. I do not think he is in at all any control of what's going on as far as the personality of this team, especially not Aaron Rodgers. They have given Aaron Rodgers a lot of flexibility as far as being able to talk what he talks, given how controversial it is anyways, and being what it is. But at some point, you have to draw the line. Rodgers not coming to a training camp now. It's getting really sickening to the fact that now you're basically relying on some of the younger players who, they have their own problems to deal with. Brees Hall is still kind of working himself back from that ACL injury. And then you got Nathaniel Hackett, who just does absolutely nothing about it. And then you got guys calling out Nathaniel Hackett. So it's just this constant cycle that we see over and over and over and over again. And this is just like another thing on top of this. So I'll say this. And then, the owner doesn't help too, being Woody Johnson, just being the terrible owner that he is and constantly putting out statements in the media. I mean, I'm not surprised that he's going out and saying, yeah, this is Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas's final year as GM and coach. But I mean, you got to look at it from this standpoint. This Jets team is probably the most dramatic team that we have seen, since that Steelers team, as far as a 3-year stretch.
Yeah.
And that Steelers team still, as far as getting away pieces, they still remain consistent. But this Jets team has a 50-year history of this. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And with Aaron Rodgers, he's the most talented quarterback they've had probably ever.
Yeah.
And now he is basically kind of rebelling in his own way. It just all adds up to just a bunch of chaos that I think is toxic for a team. And this Jets team, I just don't have a lot of optimism for them for that reason, regardless of how talented they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, talent is talent, but you have to come together. I don't believe Nathaniel Hackett at all. You know my opinion on him since he went to the Broncos as the head coach. Did not like the move. I mean, and one of the few times my word came out to be true in terms of football and the NFL. But in this case, I get it's Aaron Rodgers. They have that connection, but we'll have to see. We really do have to see. Um, the Aaron Rodgers thing is speaking of Aaron Rodgers, just want to mention in there, how is a guy who played 4 snaps in the top 100 and Jalen Johnson, who is easily a top 3 cornerback of this NFL season, doesn't make the top 110 players of 2024?
Absolutely.
I just want to put that
Absolutely.
in there. That is an absolute horror movie. Like it's like saying, "Oh, let's just eat pizza without sauce." What do you want? What do you want? You can have a white pizza, I don't mind, but no pizza, no sauce on a pizza. Like that's not pizza. That's just flatbread with cheese on it. If you want that, go to some random place on the street. Like that's disgusting. I mean, Jalen Johnson was obviously pissed about it. If you guys saw that interview, he was not happy with that. I mean, he kind of let it slide, but like, oh, that's atrocious. That's absolutely atrocious.
It is an ugly take for sure. One before we do, and I mean, it's a good foreshadowing into our next segment. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about the Brandon Ayuk situation real quick. Given this saga has been continuing to go on and on and on and on, and
Wait, Yash, I have to interrupt. I have to interrupt. Can I just mention you guys? About a month ago, I was texting Yash about the same exact situation, and I said Ayuk's gonna leave, and I told it to Yash, and this is exactly what he said to me, verbatim. I'll read it. Ain't gonna happen. He's gonna stay with us. He's just playing around. I'll tell you one thing. I've seen players play around. Money, I get it.
Debo Samuel did the same thing 2 years ago.
I've seen playing around, but I've not seen playing around for over half a year. Now that, my friend, is an issue. This started the day they lost that Super Bowl. This day they lost that Super Bowl is when the contract situation started, and it hasn't even touched that paper. His pen, they don't even have a pen near his home right now. That's how far away this deal is yet to happen. Okay, I'll let you take the floor, but I'm just saying this is quite the long pause. I'm
Look,
just
man, I'm just look for God's sakes. This is the problem I have with being a Niners fan. It takes off years off. It takes off years off your life, man. It's like, I mean, I already have enough years taken off my life with the amount of stress I have for my schoolwork and other stuff I do. The Niners doesn't being a 49ers fan doesn't help at all. Trust me. Like between between nearly losing it in 2021 pretty much every game for the last 4 or 5 games because we were, God knows, every game we were coming down to the last second to a last second play, or this year where I was literally jumping around my house while hosting a Super Bowl party against the Chiefs. I mean, it just infuriates me. I've been a fan of this team since 2000 and freaking 11. Okay, so you can imagine what I have to deal with every year. Every year, okay, we've been to 7 NFC championships, 3 Super Bowls, and it's the same thing over and over and over and over again. And with this Brandon Ayuk situation, it's deja vu. Debo Samuel 2 years ago did the same thing. I was so nervous because not only that, Debo is my favorite player on the Niners, and he's probably my favorite player in the league. All right. He was doing the same thing, requested a trade. I remember I was in my computer science class and I nearly dropped a computer that was not mine. Right. So it's like, I mean, the same thing. But here's the thing. The reason why I was so confident that we're still going to bring back Ayuk is because at the end of the day, Debo did settle down. He understood what his value was worth, and he signed an extension. And this is not the first time this has happened. It happened last year with Nick Bosa. We saw this happen with Trent Williams, Fred Warner, George Kittle. I mean, there have been a lot of contract holdouts. I don't necessarily think that there's been as serious or as temperamental of a contract holdout between for the 49ers players compared to Brandon Ayuk. But the thing is, Brandon Ayuk's also been asking for a lot more money than a lot of these guys did. Deebo Samuel, I
Yeah.
think, when he requested a trade, was asking for 26 million, which was still not even close to the market value that he would have gotten that year. I mean, Devontae Adams got paid 29 million, Tyreek Hill got paid 30 million. Brandon Ayuk's getting paid close to top dollar on the receiver market. They offered him a contract 32 or 33 million, if I remember correctly, and he still wanted more. So that goes to show you that he's really looking to set the market as far as a receiver, and I don't know if the Niners are willing to make that investment.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. You hear like one week Brandon Ayuk, they're almost ready for a trade. He's going to go to the Patriots. Then he rejects the trade. Then he goes to the Browns. They reject the trade. Now he's back in contract negotiations. Now they apparently got a deal done with the Steelers. Now they're waiting on it. Then he's going back to contract negotiations. So this one has just been a little more confusing for me. It's just like I don't know exactly where this is going to be going with all this Brandon Ayuk stuff. I'm just hoping we could survive till the of end of the season. Maybe he can at least play through a contract year. Maybe we get an extension done in the middle of the season. If not, we could probably let him go or franchise tag him, trade him, and a guy like Ricky Pearsall can maybe step up in that role. But it's as a Niners fan, man, it's extremely stressful. It doesn't help. It takes a bunch of years off my life, man.
Look, I can't add much because a 49ers fan can only describe a 49ers shirt. But when it comes to this Brandon Ayuk situation, if personally I was a Niners fan, which I'm not, but if I was, I would personally not be that stressed about it. Interestingly, the reason why I say that is with Ricky Pearsall actually there on the roster, for some reason I think that actually won't be the biggest let go if you let Brandon Ayuk go. It sounds crazy, but the reason why I think is they both have very similar style game. Great inside, they run great slants. They're also good, have great speed overall, similar weight, wingspan, measurables, also very similar. Obviously, skill is definitely not on par because of obviously that veteran experience comparatively, right? But I still think with a guy, honestly, the best game manager quarterback right now with Brock Purdy, you have not the best offensive line. I'll tell you that much, especially interior, and you guys know that. But you still have Trent Williams, the best tackle in the game right now. You have CMC, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, etc. But I think with Brandon Ayuk, the reason why it's such a huge loss, if you guys do, is because with Debo Samuel, he's not a deep threat by any measures, right? He's a great inside guy, can block. He's great in a lot of areas, but he's not spectacular in that deep threat. With Ayuk, you have that threat of that deep threat, right? So that's kind of what he brings to the table. Now, if he's gone, that's a problem. But you have Ricky Pearsall. I think 2 seasons in, he's going to give you exactly what Ayuk was giving. So it's not the biggest loss. That's how I'll interpret it, but it is a loss for sure. That's my take on that. Now, I think coming to the top 100 list, it was an interesting list. I think we can, for purposes, we'll just stick from maybe our biggest. I mean, we mentioned Aaron Rodgers. That's kind of the biggest surprise of the day. Any others that you felt was like deserved it, or you thought wasn't going to be on there, or should have been on there?
I don't think that there were a lot of players that I don't think there were a lot of players that missed the list that I was really kind of stunned about. Obviously, I think Jalen Johnson was. I don't remember if that was definitely a surprise. I don't remember if L'Jarius Sneed made the list. Did he? Um,
I don't believe so.
yeah, he did not. That one kind of upset me because I thought L'Jarius Sneed, he was the crown jewel of the Chiefs, no fly zone type repeat
Yeah.
defense this past year. You gave a lot of credit to Trent McDuffie, but L'Jarius Sneed was locking down the number one receiver of every team this past year. And, that Chiefs defense was, this reason really why the Chiefs were able to make the Super Bowl more than that offense. Mahomes not having one of the better years of his career. Obviously, we know the problems that they had with the wide receivers and whatnot. But the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, with that one, it's tricky because for a lot of people, I remember, listening to a lot of interviews from players. They were, making the argument that L'Jarius Sneed was kind of more of a scheme player. It's going to be interesting to see what he ends up doing with the Tennessee Titans, but I still think that to leave him off the list completely, that definitely should not have happened. The
Mhm.
one I was surprised about as far as just placement was Quincy Williams, linebacker in the Jets. I'm not mad that he was that. I'm not mad necessarily that he was on the list. I do think he's one of the more underrated linebackers in the game. What I am surprised about is some of the players that he was ranked higher than. Some of his own teammates, including Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. You look at guys like Kyle Hamilton, Demario Davis, and Antoine Winfield Jr., Jared Goff, Pat Surtain. I just don't know if he's that high. Like I think he's a good linebacker, but you can make an argument that he's not even the best linebacker on his own team. That might be C.J. Mosley. So it's kind of hard for me to sit here and say, okay, yeah, Quincy Williams is the number 32 best player in the league. Other than that, I really don't feel like I have a problem with a lot of the list. I think just some of the placements of like the top 10 kind of irk me, but that's kind of like, that's very, very subjective. And I don't really think that's that major that it's deserving of really criticizing. And we know with these NFL 100 lists, we've talked about this before, but these NFL 100 lists, there's no true criteria to it.
Yeah,
It's just kind of really subjectivity at the end of the day. So at the end of it's really hard to sit here and say, okay, this guy is better than this player, especially when you have a league with so many different positions that do so many different stuff, such as the
right.
NFL compared to like basketball or baseball or something like that.
Yeah, for me, I didn't have many problems with this list. The only two things that I kind of had was one, Dak Prescott's placement. 16 I felt was way too high for Dak. I personally thought Dak was worth 25, 30. Like I know I'm a Cowboys hater as usual, but like still, this was quite high for a guy who, let's be honest, couldn't do it when it mattered most, right? Yeah,
Right.
so I didn't really like Dak's placement. That was one for me. Number two, that kind of struck out with me. That was like, I don't know if I want to say disrespectful, but let me just actually look it up what the exact placement was of the specific player. Um, yeah, exactly. 51 for Keenan Allen. I just do not understand how Keenan Allen's 51. This was easily one of his best seasons, and he's 51. I get he was traded to the Bears by the greatest Joe Ortiz, but at the same time, like, how are you keeping this guy at 51? I thought Keenan Allen was a top 30 player. For me, without a doubt, I thought Keenan Allen was a top 50 player. Look at what he produced. Look at what he had to produce it with, right? And a whole injured roster throughout the season. I mean, they didn't make the playoffs by a long shot, but at the same time, like he had such a great season. We look at Caleb Williams right now. Other than his natural talent, why are we saying he's a threat? Because of the guys he has it with, and Keenan Allen is the best receiver on that team right now. So to not have him on the list seems bogus to me. But we'll leave that for another day, I guess. Now coming to the next topic, I think Josh will introduce this one. But
So with this one, this is a topic that we have done in the past. It's a very interesting one because I think it kind of sets up the season as far as some of the players that you guys might not necessarily think of to do well. But at the end of the year, when you look at this again and be like, in hindsight, kind of be looking at this list and being like, damn, these guys definitely were deserving of what they were doing. We saw the development that they have kind of gone through from the rookie season to whatever year it is for them. But this is our list for the NFL breakout players at every position. We did this last year. It didn't exactly go to full fruition because of kind of like how we arranged it.
yeah,
Hopefully this year it's a lot better with our presentation of it. But Akilesh, I'm gonna ask you to share screen for
go
the
ahead. Yeah, no worries. Um,
and there we go.
right, you guys can see my screen here.
Cool. And you guys can see it.
Yeah,
Perfect. So with the breakout players, we're gonna first start off with Akhilesh and kind of go over some of the positions that he went through and kind of talk about
Sheesh,
those.
you're putting me on the pressure pedestal. Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. Um, so I'll start off with this quarterback. I am going with Anthony Richardson. For me, it's quite simple actually. Last year, we saw what he could do within the first couple of games. He was explosive. The defense didn't know which way the ball was going to go. If the ball is in his hands, he's running a 4.340. As a quarterback, elite overall skill. His deep ball, quite honestly, just spot on overall. What's up? Um, overall, just overall spot on QB, has a great deep ball. Um, and the weird thing about him, frankly, is he's great with shorts and he's great with deeps, right? In the middle wise, like if we're going middle overall routes and stuff, he's not the best because he often throws it on the run. But even then, he's just so good when it comes to that shortstop or the deep threats. And the best thing about him is he has his ability to run everywhere and anywhere, and he's so strong in when he does. Plus, he has Jonathan Taylor. So when you run that option, and you also have Shane Steichen, who I've talked about last year, this combo between the two is one where I think that we're going to appreciate for many, many years together. Shane Steichen will go for as long as he can for the Indianapolis Colts. He's doing an incredible job there already. So I think Anthony Richardson will be breakout just because he was injured last year. This year, I think he's going to pop off. Jalen Warren. Look, this guy for me personally, we saw glimpses of him at Vegas, but we're gonna see him just top it off here at Pittsburgh because we know the running style. Najee Harris for me, he's good, but I don't think he'll start. This guy, Jalen Warren, for me, I think he's to me top notch because based off of a couple of things, he has the ability to move around within different gaps a lot more cleanly than Najee does. Their system is gonna get a lot more elusive. It's just not gonna be like I'm gonna pass it to one guy and hope for the best with a trash quarterback, right? They also have Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Again, similar vibe to Anthony Richardson, where they could go with that option. And more than Najee, Jalen fits that role. The reason why I think he'll be a breakout, we've seen his speed, we've seen his caliber, we've seen the strength. We just need to see it for a longer duration of time. I think that's what Jalen's gonna bring. So that's where he's gonna, put the cherry on top of the sundae, if you will. Drake London. This one's interesting for me. The reason why I went with Drake London, and I won't be opposed to any other names, I really won't. But for me, Drake London, why? Great route runner. Reminds me, I remember when I was putting together my like Chargers overall grade for each draft pick, when they picked McConkey, it reminded me a lot of London. Overall route running ability, McConkey's a little better, I'll give it that. But overall route running ability, deep routes, inside routes, middle routes, all those things, a lot of similarities. And the fact that now that he has Kirk Cousins as his quarterback, it's going to be better because Drake London, he's great on those short stops, and that's where Kirk Cousins loves to put that ball in. And he's also used to that kind of Justin Jefferson type of deep ball or anywhere threat, honestly. So Drake London can really expand that overall offense, especially now that they have a superb offensive line, incredibly talented running back. He's gonna have a lot more space to throw that ball overall. And Drake London, I think he's gonna have a monster season. I'll predict he's gonna have over 1,200 yards this season and over 10 touchdowns. I think that's my bold claim on that. Dalton Kincaid, for me, 24 years old. Usually, tight ends start to kind of grow and kind of pop off during that 24, 25 age. And that's where this guy is kind of right now. You look at Josh Allen, he lost Gabe Davis, he lost Stephon Diggs, kind of has a really young receiver core, and that's usually when those veteran quarterbacks lean to their tight ends to kind of take them over that bump. With Dalton, he's a good blocker, but more than that, he kind of reminds me of a Mark Andrews. Can block and then quickly get out for that pass. Very, very talented, great hands, good running ability. Not the best when it comes to overall speed. Measurables not the best, but I don't think it matters when it comes to Buffalo Bills offense just because they're gonna run an offense that's gonna be quick pass, move the ball more front, and this guy kind of has that ability. So I think that's my Dalton Kincaid argument. Rashawn Slater. I think I haven't seen Yasha's list, but I think we're going to be in agreement here when it comes to Rashawn Slater. He was out last year. We know what Harbaugh's going to bring. He's going to pound the ball down everybody's throat, regardless of who it is. I know it was
Pause.
16-3 this past
Pause.
Saturday. I
Pause.
know it was 16-3 this past Saturday, but I'll tell you one thing. Easton Stick is not our quarterback, and everyone damn sure knows that. And we didn't have a full offensive line. I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you one more thing. If anybody saw Joe Alt, they knew what was coming because that man played lights out. 21 snaps, he didn't allow himself to move 2 yards back. Dominant as anything that we've seen. I mean, everybody knows Joe belongs. Joe belongs. With Rashawn Slater, we already know great hands, great feet, etc. Just this season, because he's gonna have that allowance to use himself in that run game a lot more. He's gonna become a lot more versatile, a lot more hands. He's already a great player, a Pro Bowl player, but it's just gonna take him up another level, another notch. Now, this one I want to talk about. Most people may not even know this name, right? I think Yash, you know who I'm talking about, right? From
Yeah,
Sam Cosmi.
absolutely. I know who this is.
This guy, without a doubt, I'm gonna put the pressure on him. He'll be a top five guard this year, and I'm ready to say it.
100% agree.
Sam
I
Cosmi,
100% agree.
Sam Cosmi is gonna be the breakout guard. Not just that, he's gonna be an All-Pro, Pro Bowl number three. He'll be a top five guard in the NFL.
Wow. Okay, wow,
The,
damn.
the reason you have to watch the film, mind you. So Yash told me about this kind of idea, maybe 45 minutes before we started this recording. I quickly just jumped on, did my research, did my homework. This guy's film tape. This guy's film tape's an absolute. If you want to watch, just you know, plow down the field. This guy represents that term, that phrase more than anybody else. Incredible feet movement, amazing hands, overall great movement, great pressure. When you look at a run blocking guard, no one fits that description better. This guy was incredible. I'll just pull up some stats right now. He allowed 4.3 pressure rate allowed, ninth lowest in the entire NFL from an offensive line. Forget guard, offensive line in the NFL. Great run stuffer. PFF grade when it comes to offensive line. I know some people say it's questionable. I'm not actually that pissed off at it. 80 overall PFF grade, which is incredible considering that offensive line overall was a 62. Run game, incredible. The other reason why I would want to mention this is you look at Cliff Kingsbury, who has just gone there as the offense coordinator. We know what kind of style he likes to play. You got Jalen Daniels, again, kind of that offense similar to Anthony Richardson, a big, extremely strong, a back I really like a lot, Brian Robinson Jr. Great movement, great inside speed. You have a guy, Sam Cosmi, who's as talented as pretty much any guard in the NFL right now, creating that space, that leverage, can really move around anywhere. Was a tackle coming out of college and then moved to guard, and it's dominant there. He's gonna wreak havoc like anything, and I'll stick to that. All Pro, Pro Bowl, top five guard in the league. Coming to defense, George Karloftis explains it for itself. I mean, the guy coming out of Purdue itself was a fearsome competitor. And over these past 2 seasons, imagine your first 2 seasons in the NFL, two Super Bowls. You can't say that a lot in your career. Um, Incredible job overall, great speed, great hands. Um, Thing I didn't like about his game so much was his inability to move. He was always kind of stuck in one position. Position meaning what? He either came at the guard or the tackle, or he came
Pause.
outside. He sometimes would go to the guard. He sometimes would go to the guard, but at the same time, like he's just not really flexible. He doesn't move freely. He looks like a robot sometimes. Just either I'm gonna bull rush you or I'm gonna go to the side and try doing some Von Miller stuff when I can. This But when I see him, I kind of look at it as an edge standpoint. I don't see many edges coming up really that big, that breakout. This guy stands out to me because now he has that more of that freedom. He has a defensive line that's going to attract a lot of pressure with the likes of Chris Jones. You have great corners and overall backs in general. Good linebackers set. So it's going to give him a lot more freedom to kind of operate around. I hope he takes advantage of that this season. But that's George Karloftis for me. Jordan Davis, inside D tackle. I really wanted to put Christian Barmore in there. I really wanted to put Christian Barmore in there because he deserves it more than anybody else. But from a breakout standpoint, it has to be Jordan Davis. I mean, we saw what he could do last year, only glimpses, if I'm being honest. And I actually saw a couple of videos where people were like, Jordan Davis may be the most hyped up player in Eagles history. And they're not wrong. He did not produce astronomical numbers. But the film shows a different story because we see what he can do, and especially with Vic Fangio in there, we know what he can do when it comes to pressure. Him and pressure are synonymous, right? So with that, Jordan Davis, he's gonna have a good season for sure. I'm expecting 10 sacks or more. Brave statement, I know, but I think he can do it. Devin Lloyd, Yash has been talking about that Jaguars linebacker core, and I'm in full agreement. That is a dominant linebacker set. Has great feet, great speed more than anything else. The thing I like about personally the Jaguar set is they're very rangy. They can cover the entire field so well, and Devin Lloyd at that middle linebacker, Sam linebacker, depends on where he's placed. He's just so great. And as a leader more than anything else, top notch. Top notch. This meeting is being recorded. So currently, with that standpoint being said, Devin Lloyd, I think with that overall range that he brings to the game, the overall spacing that he also has within that linebacker set, beautifully designed defense from a roster standpoint to a as Yash. I mean, Yash can go on for ages about the Jaguars defense, but it's just so beautifully placed overall that I think Devin Lloyd is gonna pop off this season. I think he's gonna have one of the like Patrick Queen type seasons that we saw last year. I'm gonna do the safety first. Jalen Pitre. Me and Yash have talked about this guy very briefly. I think I remember one conversation about this guy. He impressed me a lot this past season in Houston. I'm not gonna say I was a huge fan of his or anything like that. I'm not the biggest fan of his now. I'll admit to it. But from a game standpoint and what he has been able to show of what he can do, it's quite incredible. Athletically, I was not seeing this guy as someone at the pinpoint top of it. Athletically, extremely strong. He has great hands. Somehow has the hands of a receiver, but looks comparatively very small, right? He's not rangy by any means in terms of overall wingspan. Measurables are not great, but he makes so much out of so little. When I say so little, I mean from a standpoint of when you compare everybody else to that position, they're athletic beasts or they're 6'2" or they're this and that. He doesn't have all those qualities, but he's able to perform on a same or better level than others. And he's showing what he can do even in the future. Especially with Houston, they have such a loaded coaching staff, immensely talented players. This season's draft particularly wasn't as impressive as last season, I'll give that. But at the same time, I mean, they have some dogs on that team. Will Anderson Jr. is not anybody to joke about. And this guy on the backside, he can help you on a double coverage if need be. He can go man to man on a tight end who's, twin tower compared to himself. He can literally take on anybody, and he's still going to be an incredible, dominant pass stopper. He can stop the run. He's not the best at it right now, but I do have some hope for future. Um, I think overall in that space, he just shows the entire world what he can do, and I think that's just leveling up his expectations overall just more and more. So Jalen Pitre for me, safety. I think he'll be a breakout.
All right.
Oh,
So
wait, one
as
sec.
for yeah.
I still got cornerbacks left. My bad.
Oh, right.
Uh, this one. Also, I want to mention one more thing about Sam Cosmi, so I'll get back to that. The cornerback for me was the most difficult position I've ever had to think about. All these other ones I was able to really jot down quickly. For me, it made clear sense. Joey Porter Jr. is the one I ultimately went though. Now, there are a couple of options that we could have taken. Yash's, which I'm just going to disclose right now, which was open all this time, so I'm going to disclose it. Joshua Williams, Kansas City Chiefs. We all understand he was a fourth round pick, and he's had such a dominant season last year. You look at that, as you mentioned, no fly defense of those Kansas City Chiefs with Steve Spagnuolo, Mister I destroyed the 16-0. Look, that guy, he makes anything out of everything. He really just took a fourth round pick and made him maybe one of the most unstoppable corners. You look at that playoff time, no one could pass on his side. No one could pass on his side. Debo absolutely covered in that Super Bowl, right? So you look at it from that standpoint. Joshua Williams was a lockdown corner. The other one that I was thinking of was Tariq Woolen. For me, Joshua Williams was third on my list. Tariq Woolen was second because I saw the top 100 video. He locked down Jamar Chase like he was nothing. He was like a piece of garbage when he came up against Tariq Woolen. Because the thing is, from an athletic standpoint, such huge range. Wingspan is incredible overall. His measurables are fantastic. His game is even better than that. I've mentioned this before in the podcast. Deion Sanders always said, "You want to be a great quarterback, gotta get a hands on. Got to put your hands on it. That's the only way you win as a cornerback. Tariq Woolen does that better than anybody else. And now you have Mike McDonald, who we saw in Baltimore took big guys, right? You look at Patrick Queen, you look at Kyle Hamilton. These are not, scrawny little nickelbacks. These are huge guys. Marlon Humphrey, for example. And he has that similar type of background set in Seattle to work with. And now that he has Tariq Woolen, he's going to take him to that next level. So I was also thinking about that. Then I remember my boy Christian Gonzalez. Fantastic corner, incredible speed. And he also has now a defensive minded coach who's relatively new style and not 50 years old, right? So he's able to bring that in as well. I'm not shooting anything at Bill Belichick. In fact, I'm only saying that crappy owner who's sitting on that eating his damn hot chocolate every single day. Stupid guy. Okay, never mind. Now, when you still have a defensive mind head coach there, and you're bringing in Christian Gonzalez to find that backspace, which he did incredibly for the first three games, I was thinking about him too. But ultimately, I went with Joey Porter Jr. Reason why? Can't say. Because there are reasons why I went with this guy. Number one, huge size, huge range, huge range. We do talk about Tariq Woolen from huge size, huge range. Joey Porter Jr. has a bigger wingspan than Tariq Woolen, right? Overall arm length is bigger. Hand size is bigger than Tariq Woolen. From an athletic standpoint, not as fast as a 40, but overall, I'll mention this. Last year, man coverage success rate, right? Overall was number one out of all corners. Forget rookies. Out of all corners was number one. Overall passer rating around allowed was 75.8, which is quite impressive for a guy who was apparently worth a second round draft pick, right? This guy is overall just incredible because I'm saying from a statistic standpoint, great leverage always goes against the best. In his rookie year, he's going against the best. He went against Jamar Chase, went against the top receivers every single time he faced them. He wasn't afraid who he went against. And the other thing that I'll say about this year the defense is gonna be fully stacked. They've got people back that they didn't have before. Minka Fitzpatrick is gonna play a different role, presumably. I think at least he's gonna play a different role with Mike Tomlin kind of changing the defense. He kind of talks about it in his interviews. I don't think he's explicitly said it, but he's kind of changing the format of it, which he's done over the past few years. This year will be different. We're gonna see the pressure being put on that quarterback more, and if you put Joey Porter on that island, I'm telling you, it's going to have an immense impact. That's why, for me, over the other players, Joey Porter Jr. is going to have that bigger impact. One thing I'll mention before I let Yash go about Sam Cosmi. The Cleveland Browns defense last year, Yash, you tell me, was that not one of the most dominant defenses we've seen in this decade?
Definitely, without a doubt.
The defensive line couldn't move past a yard against Sam Cosmi. Myles Garrett tried, couldn't do it. Their entire defense couldn't move them. You watch every game, if I'm not wrong, the only game where the Cleveland Browns couldn't sack the quarterback once and did
Was the
not allow the
Washington?
quarterback to have over a 90 quarterback rating and allowed the quarterback to have over a 90 with, what was his name? Uh, Forgot, honestly, at this point. Washington quarterbacks, kind of a tradition. But, uh,
Right.
kind of a tradition. But didn't allow a single sack the entire game. The pressure rate under 50%. That's
Without a
insane.
doubt. And you hold
Insane.
a guy like Miles Garrett that too, who was at that point having a ridiculous stretch. I mean,
Probably
and
the
he did
best
it
season of his career.
single-handedly too. That's what really impressed.
Exactly. Sam Cosmi has never went on a double block, or is never allowed a tackle to come on a double block. That's what strikes me more than anything else. And again, similar to kind of this entire list, goes up against the best. He always goes up against the best, no matter when he has to, always does. And I think that's why, for me, Cosme is going to come out. I'll say it again. You know what? I'll change it. First team All Pro, Pro Bowl starter. Number two, top five guard in the league. And what was my three? All right, we'll go with two, I guess, for now. But for me, Sam Cosme, you know what? No, he's going to be the breakout interior offensive lineman. I'll keep it as that.
Here's what I will say about Sam Cosme. Number one, when we're gonna switch now to my list. If you can move the slideshow, I don't have Sam Cosme here on this list, as you can see.
Cole
It,
Strain. Okay.
and I'll get to that in a sec. One thing I will say about Sam Cosme, he's an extremely versatile player. This was a guy who I was a huge fan of. If I remember correctly from my 2021 draft board, I think he was my 15th player on the draft. He ended up being picked, I think, 51st or 52nd overall. It was
Abysmal.
an absolute steal for Washington. The reason why I don't have him on this list is a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't trust Cliff Kingsbury to truly help him reach his max potential. But more than that, I just don't think, given that this is a list based on position, I don't exactly know what his role yet with the Washington Commanders is. I don't know whether he's going to play tackle, whether he's going to play guard. If you
I'll
had
I'll
me,
just I'll just mention Yash. So the interview I think with Cliff Kingsbury, he does mention overall roster wise he is placing him at guard. That's why I kind of
so
went with him.
well, that's the thing with a guy with the Washington with the team like the Washington Commanders. Though you never know, they can always switch out guys like
Fair,
that. And with a guy like
fair.
Sam Cosmi, they're probably going to need it more than everything. Um, if you were giving me just a pure offensive line that I would say breakout, yeah, I'd probably agree with you. Sam Cosmi definitely would be on this list. But I wanted to also go off of pure guard, so I'm going to start off with the guard pick actually. Cole Strange. This man has been given some bad press because he was picked 28th overall in 2022 when he was not
By
even expected to go in the
Bill
first two
Hall of
rounds.
Fame Belichick.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, he's a great player, but I don't think anybody would have taken him in the first round.
No.
Obviously, the Rams had a viral clip where Sean McVay and Les Snead were, laughing at the pick and whatnot. But Cole Strange has still been a very outstanding player, and the Patriots are very good at developing offensive line. He was 25th overall in PFF grades by for guards last year, and he had, if I remember correctly, had a 79 PFF grade, which is very very good. Now you give him an offensive coordinator in Alex Van Pelt, who's known for developing some of the best guards in football. Joel and not just guards, interior O line in general. Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, both of whom were all pros. J.C. Treader, long perennial Pro Bowler for a while. They cut Treader and then they added Ethan Pocic, who's pretty much nothing before he got to Cleveland and then became a top 5 center in the league for the last 2 years, or at least very close to it. So when you look at a guy like Cole Strange, who I think has the most potential of anyone on the interior O-line not named Michael Onwenu, who we obviously already know is a superstar, Cole Strange for me is the number one as far as potentially pure interior offensive lineman. I think he definitely has that locked as far as a breakout player. As far as I'm going to react to Akilesh's list first. Anthony, let me start off by saying, unlike last year, I don't think I have a single problem with any player on this list, even the ones that I went different from. Actually, I would like to say that a lot of the picks that Akilesh made were also my picks. So a few of them I did actually change. Devin Lloyd is not actually the pick for me anymore. It actually is Chargers linebacker Diane Hanley. I don't know why it shows as Devin Lloyd here. And I will get to that in a sec. But I did originally have Devin Lloyd. Yeah, there we go. But the reason I did change it is just because I think Akilesh and I had very similar picks on a lot of these players. So I didn't want to sound like we were just going down the same route. As far as just overall, As far as quarterback, Anthony Richardson, you're 100% right about. The reason I would go Trevor Lawrence, though, I think he's a better pure passer, and I do think that overall he has shown a lot more already than Anthony Richardson. He is older, he has a little bit more veteran experience, and you just gave him two of the best deep threats that he could have gotten this year in Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas in the draft. And he is, as far as his deep ball percentage, he is one of the most efficient deep ball passers in the league. If I remember correctly, he had the third best QBR in the league from week 8 of 2022 up till the time he got injured back in 2023. So he was very much playing like an elite quarterback, but the injuries, kind of situations, sometimes the play calling at that time, things like that tend to make him very inconsistent. But I think with a more stable offense in general, if he manages to stay healthy the whole year with a receiving back like ETN and that many receiving weapons, including Evan Ingram, who's a very good receiving tight end in his own right, and a much improved offensive line, I think Lawrence will break out and eventually look to be that elite quarterback. Maybe not to the same hype that he got out of college, but I still think he has the opportunity to be top 5, top 10 type quarterback. As far as running back Jaylen Warren, you nailed it on the dot. There were a couple other players I actually had in mind. One of them actually was Jaylen Warren's teammate, Najee Harris. That really, to me, comes down to who Arthur Smith values more in the run game. Given that Jaylen Warren is the more unknown commodity than Najee Harris, former first round pick, I am inclined to think that Arthur Smith will go for Jaylen Warren because God knows he likes some of the to give the ball to some of the strangest players on the planet. Michael Pruitt, Jonnu Smith, Kadero Hodge. There was a joke going on that he's gonna run the ball through Nate Herbig for the Steelers. I don't even think Nate Herbig plays on the team anymore, but that just goes to show you. But Jaylen Warren. And by the way, if for those of you who don't know who those players are, that's part of the point I'm trying to make there. But with Jaylen Warren, I mean, this is a guy who was he was 4th in the league as far as what was the word attempts per broken tackle. And this is one of the stats that I look at when it comes to how running backs can really make create for themselves, basically, when the chips are down, when everyone kind of starts getting at them, when they can't really necessarily rely on their offensive line. How do you step up? And Jaylen Warren was one of the best young running backs when it came to that. If he got more opportunities, there was no doubt in my mind that he would have been looked at as maybe a top 10 running back. He's not yet, but when you get a guy like Arthur Smith who definitely loves to run the ball, I think Jaylen Warren is definitely going to get a lot of opportunities. As far as wide receiver goes, I'm not mad at the Drake London pick. I do have a few questions about the Falcons' new offensive coordinator that I feel need to be answered before I figure out whether Drake London can make that breakout type role. Also, I do think London is at a point where he's still considered top 20 wide receiver. It's just a matter of, can he reach that high potential that I think both you and I know he's definitely worth. A lot of people compared him to like a guy like Mike Evans coming out of the draft, and we know Mike Evans has been one of the most consistent, best receivers over the past decade. Can Drake London reach that type of production? That's something I think we'll have to see with the Falcons' new offensive coordinator. I feel like my pick is a little bit of a reach, but I do like Calvin Austin a little bit, more than a little bit for sure. This guy was one of my favorite players coming out of the draft from Memphis back in 2022. Reminded me in a lot of ways of Tyreek Hill as far as the way he played the game. Very, very strong as far as being able to get the ball at the contact point in the air. Extremely athletic, very, very fast. I think he had a sub 4.3 40 and a very underrated route runner. And like I said, Arthur Smith loves the unknown commodities on his team. So yeah, they got Van Jefferson, they got George Pickens and whatnot, but I think Calvin Austin, with especially Arthur Smith's type of scheme, I think he'll thrive down those those underneath post routes, underneath shallow type routes. And Austin is very good at getting yak. So I really would not be shocked if Calvin Austin goes for maybe 1,000 yards. But again, like I said, there's just not a lot of depth as far as breakout type players. The true definition of breakout players, the guys that just come out of absolutely nowhere. So for me, Calvin Austin is probably the best as far as that definition. But again, depending on if you're just saying a breakout player is a guy who's already good but reaches his potential, I wouldn't be mad at the Drake London pick for that reason. Tight end, I went Chigoziem Okonkwo. I think this is the second straight year. Actually, I've had him as my
Put him last year too.
breakout tight
I put
end.
him last year, I think, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Here's the
Out
thing.
of Tennessee. Come on.
Look. Here's the thing, though. I really, really like this guy. I mean, this man is one of the most underrated receiving tight ends in the league. He's very good at creating plays for himself. He's very good at. He's very underrated as far as blocking too. I'm not saying he's like a George Kittle as far as blocking, but he's very, he very much fits this system of new head coach Brian Callahan for the Tennessee Titans. This is a guy who loves receiving tight ends in general. Uh, and you give him a guy like Chigoziem Okonkwo, certainly the most talented tight end he's ever had. He's given guys like CJ Uzama, Drew Sample, Hayden Hurst opportunities, and he's gotten them some big contracts. So with a guy like Okonkwo, even with as many good receivers as the Titans have, I would still expect Okonkwo to really thrive in the scheme that Bill Callahan or Brian Callahan, excuse me, has given for him. For that reason, I just think that he is bound for a breakout season. As far as tackle, I went with Sean Slater, much like Akilesh. I think Slater. The thing with Slater is that he was very, very good as a rookie. We all know that he was a Pro Bowler, but he's had to deal with some injuries. Akilesh nailed it on the dot. I think with both me and Akilesh, we think his potential is so much more higher than what he's already shown. I think he has just scratched the surface of what he has to reach, and now you give him a coach like Jim Harbaugh and an offensive coordinator like Greg Roman, excuse me. He's going to thrive, especially playing as a left tackle. We know that Jim Harbaugh loves those athletic type tackles, what he did for Joe Staley's career when he was with the 49ers. I think Rashawn Slater is in for a big season that way. I mentioned Colt Strange. Edge rusher George Karlaftis. Much like Akilesh, I'm going to go Karlaftis. For those of you who don't know, this guy was my number one player in the 2022 draft. I love this man so much. I had him above Aiden Hutchinson, and I'm a Michigan fan. So like that goes to show you, like this man was really, really, really high on my list, and he is
Delusional.
in his second year. He has flashed some of the potential that I saw him and saw
Wait,
from
wait,
him
wait,
in
wait,
college.
wait, 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 wait. Rewind. You had George Karlaftis above Aiden Hutchinson.
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
okay.
I think Aiden Hutchinson
You're a
was my
delusional
third
ding
player.
dong.
Yeah.
What was
So I
wrong?
had Karlaftis 1, I think I had Sauce Gardner 2, and then Hutchinson 3.
Oh my god. You delusional ding dong.
Hey,
George Karlaftis above Sauce.
okay,
No touchdowns allowed. No touchdowns allowed.
to
Under
be
200
fair,
yards
okay,
allowed on him.
to be fair
Over
though,
3 years?
no, sorry, I did not have Sauce actually. I did not have Sauce. I think Sauce might have been my fourth player. Excuse me. That
Oh,
one was a confusing. That was a confusing draft for me, definitely, without a
confusing.
doubt.
Confusing what?
You know me when it comes to cornerbacks. I always
Oh
get the wrong
man.
cornerback
Oh
as number
man.
one.
Oh
It's
come
always so for those of you who don't know, okay, for cornerbacks, there are always the two cornerbacks in the draft that I'm like, okay, I love these two cornerbacks. Which one do I think is better? I'm always on the seesaw when it comes to that. And for the last, even since I really started watching the draft, I've always gotten it wrong. Okay. I had
You've had too many McDouble cheeseburgers or whatever you want to call them,
no
bro.
no here
Holy golly jeez.
I mean,
What?
this is how bad my track record is. Let me look at this. All right. So in
Oh my god.
2017, I had who
I
did I have?
watched worse horror movies than this.
I had Marlon Humphrey ahead of Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore won Defensive Rookie of the Year. In 2018, I had Denzel Ward ahead of Jair Alexander. Jair Alexander won All Pro a few years later. In 2020, I had who was it? AJ Terrell ahead of Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson won first team All Pro this past year. Then in 2021, I had J.C. Horn ahead of Pat Surtain. Pat Surtain is easily one of the best
Oh,
cornerbacks in the league. And
JC
then in
Horn
2022,
above
I had
Pat.
Derek Stingley above Sauce Gardner. And yeah,
Golly
we've seen
jeez.
how that's gone. So
Oh, golly jeez.
yeah, I'm not very good, and I'm fully expecting the same thing this year with my top two cornerbacks because that's my
Oh
luck when
no,
it comes to this. But
there's one corner. Hey, I've done extensive research on cornerbacks this year. For this upcoming draft, you better have the guy I'm thinking of at number one. If you don't, well, you know what? I'll say this right now. Podcast for next year's NFL draft. We'll have an entire podcast just on the top 10 cornerbacks. An entire podcast. I'll guarantee you guys. And I will go through Yash. If he doesn't have the guy, if he doesn't have my top five, I will go through Yash on why he was wrong. I will go through it. I'll detail it, every single fine print detail. Because Sauce Gardner, fourth, George Karloftis first, Mr. Robot. Oh,
I think I had Derek Stingley 2, Hutchinson 3, Sauce Gardner 4.
yeah,
I don't remember the exact. Don't take my word for that. I
yeah,
have to
yeah. No,
go
I
check
got
it.
it.
But
I just
yeah.
don't see how Aiden Hutchinson wasn't your number one.
Hey, that was a bad draft for me. I had Malik Willis as my fifth overall player. So
Okay. Oh
yeah,
no,
so
no, no, no.
that was just a bad draft for me.
All right.
But either way, we going back to this. George Karlaftis, he was my number one player, and we saw flashes of the potential that I saw in him from college. The same type of game that he showed, and I think Steve Spagnuolo has helped him develop in this sense. Um, he had a ridiculous Super Bowl as far as the way he played. It was constantly in the face of Brock Purdy. I think if you're just talking about defensive players, the defensive MVP of that game for me, Snead was up there, McDuffie was up there, but I'd say Karlaftis had the best game of his life in that game. And there are certainly other edge rushers that I have in consideration for this. Kevon Thibodeau was one. I had Byron Young is another from the Rams. Joe Tryon Shoyinka. There were a few others, but I ended up going with Karlaftis just because of how much I think this guy, how much potential I see in this guy. Um, I think of all the defensive edge rushers, he's shown the most potential. He gets double teamed a lot more than people think, and that's even with Chris Jones getting a lot of the attention from opposing offensive linemen. It just goes to me that Carl, a lot of people understand the type of threat that he's going to show as he continues to develop, and for that reason, I have Karlaftis as my breakout edge rusher. Interior D line, Jordan Davis. I went with Davis. Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator there. Davis is extremely, extremely athletic. I would say he's the most talented interior D line Vic Fangio has probably ever coached. But then again, I can't remember a lot of players that Vic Fangio's coached back in the day, so it's kind of hard for me to sit here and say that. But as far as Jordan Davis, extremely athletic, great at clogging the middle. That's one thing I don't think Akilesh mentioned. He's very good as really any type of defensive tackle position that you try to play in free technique, standard 3-4 defensive end, or even if you're talking about a nose tackle. I think from what I've seen in interviews by Vic Fangio, he's probably going to have Jordan Davis run a lot of the same type of things that Justin Smith ran with the 49ers. And from that standpoint, I think Davis can probably end up being, you're looking at a guy who I don't know if he's going to end up having 10 sacks. He's definitely has that type of talent, but he's definitely going to have, I would say, close to leading the league in tackles for loss under Vic Fangio. As far as linebacker with Diane Hanley, I mentioned Devin Lloyd. I love the Jaguars defense. I love their defensive coordinator, Ryan Nelson. Basically, think of it this way. What Akilesh was with Brandon Staley, how obsessed he was, that's me with Ryan Nelson. I've loved this guy since he got hired by the Saints back in 2017. He is great as far as being able to develop linebackers. I think what he did for developing a guy like Demario Davis, we saw that Demario Davis turn into not just one of the best linebackers, but one of the best coverage linebackers. And as Akilesh mentioned, Devin Lloyd is so great at covering field, being able to stay with even some of the best tight ends and some of the best wide receivers in the game. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot of with with Ryan Nielsen as his defensive coordinator. Obviously, like I said, just for the sake of not having the same players, I'm going to mention Dan Henley. This was a guy that I didn't even really consider. I mean, I'd barely gone over his film last year, and I probably should have gone over his film a little bit more before the draft. Um, my apologies. I had AP tests at the time, but um, Diane Hanley, this is a man who is now going to be coached by one of the best linebackers and a guy who came from similar circumstances in Navarro Bowman. Um, third round pick, very athletic, very good at covering ground across from side to side. I think Hanley shows a lot of that. I think Hanley is a little more athletic than Navarro Bowman was coming out of college. He's not nearly as strong, but I think that you have that both of them in a defensive scheme that's covered by Jesse Minter. That is going to be a really, really, really terrifying um, linebacker duo to have to deal with if you're a tight end like Travis Kelsey or Greg Dulcich or Michael Mayer or Brock Bowers. Because these guys can really keep up with you. They got great footwork and they've been able to do this for a while. As far as the cornerbacks, like Akilesh mentioned, this is a deep, deep cornerback breakout type class. There were a lot of cornerbacks I considered the aforementioned Joey Porter that Akilesh went through. I'm not mad at that whatsoever. I also considered guys, the Browns cornerbacks, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson. Falcons cornerback Clark Phillips, one of the more underrated cornerbacks that I don't think gets talked about that much. Rams Kobe Durant, even guys like what's his face? The why am I forgetting his name? The Chargers cornerback, Asante Samuel Jr. But I did end up going with Joshua Williams because this is one thing I don't think people can consider. Joshua Williams allowed only 44.2% of his passes to be completed. He only started 2 games and still was targeted 30 times, and he only allowed 12 of his passes to be completed. That is an insane mark. And now you're probably going to, with Jerry Sneed out of the picture, you're probably going to have him start on one side of the field. We saw what he did in 2022 as a rookie, being able to lock down guys like Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen had a terrible game against him, one of those two, I remember. And then even guys like Devontae Adams have talked about how difficult he is to kind of get around a guy like Joshua Williams because of his technique. When you get a guy who's that good in man coverage and you look at the tape, Joshua Williams, his footwork, he knows where he needs to be at the right time, and I think he's a perfect player as far as a Steve Spagnuolo type of defensive back. And Spagnuolo has a history of developing quarterbacks that you just don't think of. He brought back Kendall Fuller's career from the dead. They tried the same thing with Rashad Fenton until they decided to move him to nickelback. They did that with Jalen Watson. They did that with Snead. They did that with a few other guys. And I think Joshua Williams is the next one in line. And then Jalen Petrie, I really don't think I need to mention that much about him. Akilesh really went over him. He is a guy that can cover the entire field really, really well, and that's in spite of his lack of athleticism relative to his peers. You give him a coach like D'Amico Ryans, and D'Amico Ryans knows how to develop safeties. I think Jalen Petrie, going into year three, is going to do a lot of damage. So yeah, these are kind of my spots. I think a lot of it depends really on coaching and who you have as your coach. For me, but yeah, there are a lot of great breakout players this year, and I think it's set us up for a very exciting 2024 NFL season.
Yeah. Look, you had a couple of similarities: George Karlaftis, Jordan Davis, etc. Cold Strange for me was kind of pull out of the hat type situation, but I'm not mad at it. But I understand it. However, the reason why even though now that I think about it, he is that pure guard sense. The reason why I didn't want to put it, even if I had that option, I wouldn't put him there, is because of just the lack of running ability on this team overall. You look at their quarterback situation. It's Drake May is not gonna be that type of Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams type of I can run it. He's not that type of guy. You need a solid running back, and I just don't think we have a solid running back right now to fall on. But in coming years, I think you'll be right. I think he can be one of the best guards in the league. When it comes to Dane Hanley, the reason why look, I've seen him on the Chargers. I've seen the practice videos. He's an athletic freak. But at the same time, I just don't see him popping off this season. You do have to give it one more season before he comes in. Allow all the veterans to kind of put their veteran juice into these guys, and then maybe I'll say it. But right now, I think I still have to stick with Devin Lloyd. But overall, I'm not mad at this. Okonkwo, I get it's a love relationship between you guys, but I just don't see I really don't see it working out. Calvin Austin's a good pull. In fact, I think I might have to sit down on Drake London. I do think Calvin Austin is a much more deserving pick. Trevor Lawrence for me, I get it, but at the same time, it's like for me, a breakout player is not a Pro Bowl player. Reason why I say that is if Gardner Minshew can make the playoffs, then playoffs kind of, or the Pro Bowl rather, it's kind of becoming an obsolete term. So for me, Trevor Lawrence is going to be a Pro Bowler, but I'm not sure if he's going to be an All Pro. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm kind of leaning at when it comes to Trevor Lawrence because he does have that type of ceiling. But with Anthony Richardson, he's going to go from haven't played more than half a season to I'm going to play a full season where I'm going to be a top 15 quarterback. I think that's where I'm seeing that breakout sense.
Right.
So, um, couple of disagreements per se, but I think overall list is good. I just think mine is better. But we'll end it off with. I'm joking. No, we'll end it off there. I think both our lists are great, but I think for both of our cases, we've seen a lot of similarities, and I think overall our study of each individual, our players, understanding coaching perspectives has gotten better. So, with that, we will end our podcast today. Hope you guys had a lot of fun. Do put in the comments if you guys would recommend anything else that we do. We are going to try to kind of promote the platform out a little bit larger as we go, but yeah, that'll be our final one in California because Yash is gonna go to one of the best footballing programs in the country at LSU. So last one in California, and hope to see you guys soon.
Peace.